My name is Evelyn Hale, and I am 60 years old. I never believed I would reach this age with a story still burning inside my chest, pressing against my ribs like a memory that refuses to die. People assume that by 60 you're calm, healed, settled, and wise. But the truth is, some storms never really leave you. They stay inside you, hidden under your smile, under your polite nods, under the quiet way you pour your morning coffee. I lived half a century carrying a story that I had never told anyone. Not my children, not my closest friends, not even the man who once said he loved me. I kept it all buried because I didn't want anyone to see how deeply I had been fooled and how completely I destroyed the person who thought he had won. Tonight, for the first time, I'm telling everything, from the first warning signs to the final moment when I ended his perfect little plan. It all began many years ago, when I was 22 and foolish enough to believe that kindness meant safety. Back then, I lived in a small coastal town in South Carolina, the kind of place where everyone waved at each other and whispered behind closed doors. I was young, hopeful, and full of soft dreams. I thought life would be predictable. Marriage, a house, a stable job, maybe 2 children. I didn't know that life had a different script waiting for me, a darker one written by a man who pretended to be my soulmate while he was slowly, quietly building a plan that would destroy everything I had. His name was Daniel Ward. Charming, polished, soft-spoken, the kind of man who knew exactly how to make a woman feel seen. I met him at my first job, a small accounting firm downtown. He walked in wearing a gray suit and a smile that looked like it had been rehearsed. He introduced himself with a voice that felt warm and safe. It was the way he said my name, slow, gentle, like it mattered, that pulled me in. I was young. I didn't know that people who speak softly can still hide sharp intentions. I didn't know that the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in tenderness. We married 2 years later. Everyone said we looked perfect together. Everyone saw the outside picture, wedding dress, church bells, happy vows. No one saw the small cracks that already existed. The way he needed everything his way. The way he complimented me only when others were watching. The way he corrected me in private, as if he was polishing a flaw. I ignored those signs because I believed love meant patience. I believed a good wife keeps things peaceful. But peace is expensive when you're the only one paying for it. For the next 20 years, I worked, raised our children, built a home, supported his career, and swallowed every strange moment that didn't feel right. He traveled often, too often. He stayed late at the office. He kept his phone locked. But he always had an explanation ready, delivered in that same calm voice that made me doubt myself instead of him. It wasn't one big moment that revealed who he really was. It was 1,000 little ones. One afternoon, I found a receipt in the pocket of his jacket. A dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant on a night he told me he was out of town. I held it in my hand for 10 minutes, trying to breathe. When I asked him about it, he didn't get angry. He didn't panic. He just smiled in that gentle, careful way of his and said, "You're imagining things, Evelyn." I wanted to believe him. So I did. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and once doubt grows, it doesn't stop. Fast forward many years. Our children grown, our hair beginning to gray. Life should have felt stable, but instead I felt uneasy. Something inside me kept whispering that Daniel had been building something behind my back. A plan, a secret, a future that didn't include me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it existed. Sometimes he would get quiet when I walked into the room. Sometimes he would take phone calls outside. Sometimes he would look at me with a strange emptiness, as if I had already become someone he no longer needed. I ignored it for years. But everything changed on my 59th birthday. We were sitting at the dinner table, the two of us, alone. Our children couldn't make it that night, and honestly, I was relieved. They didn't need to witness the tension that had crept between us like a silent ghost. Daniel poured me a glass of wine, then watched me with an expression that felt rehearsed. He was waiting for something. I didn't know what. Halfway through dinner, he cleared his throat and said, "Evelyn, we should talk." My heart tightened. Women know. Even before the words are spoken, they know. He said he wanted a separation. Not a fight, not a discussion, not a chance to fix things. Just a clean, organized separation. He already had the paperwork. He already had a new apartment lined up. He already had an excuse prepared. "We've grown apart," he said gently, as if he was comforting me. I looked at him across the table and suddenly saw everything I had refused to see for 40 years. The coldness in his eyes, the calculated tone, the way he had been planning this moment long before he chose the words. It wasn't just a separation. He was trying to remove me from his life as quietly as possible, like a piece of furniture he no longer needed. But the worst part came after. With a soft sigh, he said, "I'll be taking the house. It makes more sense financially. You can move into something smaller." That was the moment something inside me cracked open. Not because of the house, not because of the betrayal, but because I finally saw the truth. He had never loved me. Not really. I was a placeholder in his perfect little plan. A plan that he had been crafting for years while pretending to build a life with me. I didn't cry that night. Not in front of him. Not even after he left the room. Instead, I sat there in complete silence, staring at the divorce papers he had placed on the table. My hands were cold. My chest felt hollow. But my mind was sharper than it had ever been. For 40 years, I had been the quiet wife, the supportive wife, the trusting wife. But in that moment, I wasn't any of those things. For the first time in my life, I felt something new. Not anger, not heartbreak. Something calmer, something steady, something powerful. I realized that he had spent decades thinking he was smarter than me. He built a secret life. He built a backup plan. He built an exit. He thought he had covered every detail. He thought he had won. But he'd forgotten one thing. He had spent 40 years teaching me exactly how he thinks, exactly how he hides things, exactly how he lies. He had spent 40 years underestimating me. I picked up the divorce papers and read every word carefully. And for the first time in our marriage, I smiled. Because I knew something he didn't know, something that would change everything. His perfect little plan wasn't perfect. Not anymore. And I wasn't the same Evelyn he had spent his life controlling. The game had just begun, and I wasn't planning to lose. I didn't sleep the night after Daniel asked for the separation. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while memories floated through my mind like ghosts. 40 years of marriage unraveling right in front of me, and yet I didn't feel broken. Not anymore. The shock had burned away. The tears had dried before they even had a chance to fall. All that remained inside me was clarity, cold, sharp clarity that I hadn't felt in decades. At 6 a.m, I got out of bed, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and walked into the kitchen. The house was silent, almost too silent, like it was holding its breath. I made a cup of tea and sat at the table, the same table where he had placed the divorce papers the night before. They were still there, lying untouched, as if waiting for me to surrender. But instead of fear, I felt something very different when I looked at them. I felt control. For so many years, I had let him shape the life we lived, the schedules, the finances, the long stretches of work trips that were probably nothing more than excuses. I had been the one holding the house together while he built a hidden world somewhere else. But now things were different. He hadn't left yet, and that meant everything he owned, everything he planned, every secret he thought he had locked away was still under the same roof as me. Daniel woke up around 7. I heard the familiar sound of his footsteps, the steady, confident walk of a man who believed he had already won. He always walked like that, like the world bent around him, like he deserved everything he touched. That morning, he came into the kitchen humming softly, acting as if the night before had been nothing more than an uncomfortable conversation. "Good morning," he said gently. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at him. For the first time in 40 years, I watched confusion flicker across his face. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. Silence, I realized, was more powerful than any words I could have spoken. He cleared his throat. "I think it would be best for both of us if we handle this calmly. No fights, no drama. Let's make this simple." Simple. That was exactly what he wanted. A simple exit. A simple transfer of assets. A simple erasure of me from his life. But nothing about this was going to be simple. I waited until he left for work, if it was even work anymore, and then I walked into the study, the room he always kept locked, the room he believed I never had any business entering. But what Daniel never realized was that a locked door isn't a real barrier for a wife who has spent most of her life cleaning every corner of the house. Years ago, when I was rearranging storage boxes, I had found a spare key tucked inside an old dictionary. He forgot it existed. I never did. The key slid into the lock as easily as if it had been waiting. I opened the door slowly. His study smelled like expensive cologne and secrets. A heavy wooden desk sat in the middle of the room, organized perfectly, too perfectly. Daniel wasn't a neat person, not naturally. He had created this space for one reason, to hide the parts of his life he didn't want me to see. The first thing I did was open the top drawer of the desk. Contracts, insurance forms, bank statements with names of accounts I had never seen before. I scanned each page slowly, absorbing every number, every transaction, every date. He had been moving money for years. Small transfers, hidden investments, property he bought under a different identity. I recognized none of it. He had been preparing to leave me for a long time. But I also noticed something else, something he must have assumed I wouldn't understand. A few of the accounts weren't just in his name. They were in both of ours. Joint investments, ones he never told me about. Maybe he had created them years ago for tax benefits or to look like a family man, but they were legally half mine. He wanted the house. He wanted the assets. He wanted a clean break. But without knowing it, he had already given me more leverage than he ever intended. My hands didn't shake, not even once. I kept opening every drawer, every folder, every cabinet. I found a second phone inside a locked box at the bottom of the shelf, a phone I had never seen before. When I powered it on, the first thing that appeared was a message notification. From someone named L. A woman. "Call me when she sleeps. We need to finalize everything before she finds out." Before she finds out. The words hit me with a quiet heaviness. Not shock, just confirmation. He had someone else. He had been planning a life with another woman, one that required me to simply disappear. And he expected me to play along, to sign the papers, to step aside gracefully like a character he no longer needed in his script. But he didn't know I had already turned the page. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, not because I was scared, but because the timing wasn't right. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't going to shout or cry or demand answers. That would only give him control. Instead, I pulled out my own phone and took pictures of everything. Every bank statement, every form, every document that showed he had been shifting money, every secret account, every property, every message, every detail of his perfect little plan. Then I walked out of the study and locked it behind me, leaving everything exactly where it was, like a crime scene, untouched. That afternoon, I went to the library, not to read, but to use the computer there. Daniel had always taught me how to manage finances. Ironically, a mistake he would regret, because over the years, I learned more than he realized. I learned how to trace funds, how to look for inconsistencies, how to read the fine print in legal documents. And he had been messy. Too messy. For a man who built a secret life, he was careless in the small details. Transfers made too close together, investments registered under addresses he didn't live at, names that were fake but sloppy. It didn't take long before I understood everything. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to make sure I walked away with absolutely nothing. The house wasn't because of financial sense. It was because he had already prepared to sell it. The accounts he wanted to close weren't because they were shared. It was because he had hidden transactions he didn't want discovered. He wasn't just ending our marriage, he was erasing me entirely. But while he had spent years preparing, I only needed one day to dismantle it. When I returned home, Daniel was in the living room typing on his laptop. He didn't look up when I walked in, which was unusual. He always liked to perform affection, especially in the early years of our marriage. But now he barely acknowledged me, almost as if he had already placed me outside his life, excluded, irrelevant. "What are you doing?" he asked, still staring at the screen. "Just cleaning," I replied. He nodded, uninterested. He thought I was still in shock. He thought I was processing. He thought he still had control. But he didn't notice the small USB drive in my hand. He didn't notice that the woman he underestimated was now 3 steps ahead of him. He didn't know that the game he started was no longer his to win. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, finally looking at me with that same practiced softness. "I know this is hard, but we both deserve to be happy." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. I wondered if he would still say the same thing after learning what I knew, after seeing what I had gathered, after discovering that his perfect little plan had holes big enough for me to walk straight through. I gave him a small smile. "You're right," I said softly. He didn't see the meaning behind my words. He didn't see the shift in my eyes. He didn't see the storm forming behind my calm expression. He just believed he had convinced me. But that night, when he went to sleep in the guest room, I sat on the couch in the dark and whispered to myself, "You took 40 years from me, but you won't take the ending." Because endings matter more than beginnings. He wrote the first half of our story, but I would write the last. And in my ending, he wasn't going to win. Not this time, not ever again. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because my mind wouldn't let me rest anymore. It felt like something inside me had shifted forever. For decades, I lived in Daniel's shadow, afraid to question him, afraid to disturb the gentle balance of our carefully curated life. But now, the quiet fear was gone, replaced by a strange, steady calmness. The kind of calmness a woman feels when she finally chooses herself. The house was still dark when I walked into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table, our table, where the divorce papers still lay untouched. I looked at them again, the way I had looked at them the night he gave them to me. But this time, I didn't feel pain or betrayal. I felt strategy. Daniel wanted to remove me neatly from his life. He wanted no complications. He wanted everything to look polite and civilized, as if 40 years of betrayal could be wrapped up in a clean stack of papers. But he had given me time, and time was the one thing he shouldn't have given me. While I was sipping my coffee, I heard footsteps upstairs. He was awake. I didn't move. I didn't want him to think anything had changed. I wanted him to believe I was still that quiet, obedient, predictable wife he had shaped over 4 decades. He walked into the kitchen wearing the same gray suit he always wore when he wanted to appear serious and composed. He said good morning with a soft, controlled smile, and I looked at him the same way I had looked at him for years. Calm, neutral, unreadable. Except now, I wasn't the woman he thought I was. "I'll be home late," he said casually while adjusting his tie. Meetings. The same meetings he had been attending for years, which were probably nothing more than hours spent with Elle, the woman who had replaced me without ever stepping foot into my life. I nodded, pretending not to care. That was the first part of my plan. Let him feel safe. Let him believe I wasn't capable of anything. Let him underestimate me just a little longer. After he left, I sat alone for a few minutes, letting the silence settle around me. And then for the first time in my life, I walked upstairs to his closet, not to clean, not to organize, not to find things hidden, but to count. His suits, his ties, his jewelry, his personal items, his documents. What was missing? What had he already moved to his new apartment? What had he hidden? I took pictures of everything, not because I needed the images, but because I wanted evidence. I wanted a record of every piece of his life he hadn't yet erased from our home. Then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I sat down on the bedroom floor and started going through his travel bags. One was empty, the second had a few work files, but the last one, the smallest, the sleek one, had something inside. A folder. Inside it were photocopies of financial documents I hadn't seen before. Accounts, transfers, signatures that weren't mine, but somehow were assigned to me. My name had been used, my identity used to authorize things I had never approved. Fake signatures, forged forms, all neatly arranged and carefully hidden in that small bag. I felt the air leave my lungs. He hadn't just planned to remove me, he had planned to use me, to make it look like I had agreed, to make it look like I had given up my rights willingly, to make it look like I was the careless one. He wasn't trying to erase me quietly, he was trying to erase me legally. That's when I realized something new. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an attack, and he expected me not to fight back. I closed the folder, placed it back inside the bag, and walked downstairs. My hands were cold, but my mind was on fire. The more I looked around the house, the more I saw clues of his intentions. The small details I had ignored for years suddenly formed a pattern. He had removed his personal photos from the living room. He had taken most of his books from the office shelf. He had left only the things that made the house feel empty without me realizing it. He had already begun disappearing, but he had forgotten something important. You cannot erase someone who finally understands the value of his own presence. I took a deep breath, grabbed my handbag, and left the house. My destination wasn't the library this time. It was the office of an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but someone who had always been honest with me. Her name was Linda Monroe, and she was a retired lawyer. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she did what only true friends do. She hugged me without asking a single question. We sat on her couch, and I told her everything. The divorce, the second phone, The documents, the forged signatures, the secret accounts, the other woman. She listened quietly, her face turning more serious with every sentence. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said the words that changed everything. Evelyn, you have more power right now than you realize. I stared at her, confused. What do you mean? She planned this, every detail. He thought he covered everything, but he made a mistake. He underestimated you, legally, emotionally, strategically. He assumed you'd sign. He assumed you wouldn't look deeper. He assumed you'd simply let him go. She leaned forward. But now that you've seen the truth, you have the upper hand. Upper hand. I had never heard those words associated with me before. I had always been the accommodating one, the quieter one, the patient one. But now, hearing those words felt like stepping into a version of myself I had hidden for too long. Linda stood up and walked to her desk. She took out a notepad and started writing something. She said, I'm going to recommend something you might not understand right away, but I need you to trust me. I nodded. Do not confront him. Do not show anger. Do not show fear. Do not sign anything, not until I tell you. She looked directly into my eyes. And act normal. I mean, completely, totally normal. He cannot know that you know. It felt wrong, pretending everything was fine, acting calm, smiling when I wanted to scream. But I understood the strategy. If he felt threatened too soon, he would disappear before I could stop him. He would move everything. He would destroy the evidence. He had to believe he was still in control. That's the only way you'll win, Linda said as she placed her hand gently on mine. He thinks the game is simple. He doesn't know that you've entered it. I left her house with a strange mix of fear and strength swirling inside me. The plan wasn't complete yet, but I had direction. I had leverage. I had someone who understood the legal system better than I ever could. Now, I just had to play my part. When I walked into the house that evening, Daniel was already home. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up. He barely acknowledged me. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. Because now I knew exactly why he behaved that way. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a loose end he was trying to tie off, a final task before beginning his new polished life. I walked into the kitchen, prepared dinner, and served it quietly, without emotion, without questions. He interpreted my silence as acceptance. Relief flickered across his face. He thought I was surrendering. He thought the battle was already over. During dinner, he said, I'm glad we're being mature about this. I looked up slowly, gave him the softest, calmest smile I could manage, and said, Of course, Daniel, whatever makes things easier for you. He smiled back satisfied. He didn't notice the small tilt of my head, the controlled breath, the steady eyes watching him. He didn't notice that I wasn't breaking. I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right proof, waiting for the right move. Later that night, after he went to bed, I stood outside the guest room door listening to his slow, heavy breathing. For years, that sound meant comfort. But now, it meant opportunity. It meant time. It meant he believed I was harmless. I walked back downstairs, turned off the lights, and sat at the dining table, alone. I placed the divorce papers in front of me and ran my fingers across the edge. He thought he had already won. He thought the story was ending. He thought I was fading away. But what he didn't know was, I had just started writing my own ending, and I didn't sleep the night after discovering those files. I stayed at the kitchen table with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator behind me and the storm running wild inside my head. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Because now I knew why he acted like every decision had to go through him, why he kept insisting that I didn't need to worry about the paperwork, why he said things like, "You focus on cooking, sweetheart, I'll handle the real stuff." He was never protecting me, he was preparing to erase me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something chilling. Eric had always been planning an exit. He hadn't fallen into temptation. He hadn't made some heat-of-the-moment mistake. He had been slowly moving pieces around like a man arranging a chessboard years before the final match. And I had been nothing but the queen he planned to sacrifice. I sat there until sunrise, staring at the documents. My hands were shaking, but my mind was strangely calm. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. A confrontation would give him exactly what he expected: anger, emotion, chaos. And men like Eric know how to turn chaos into advantage. No, I would stay silent, and I would listen, observe, learn, and eventually strike. Around 7 a.m., I heard his footsteps upstairs. His cheerful morning voice floated down to me. "Morning, babe. You up early?" Early? I had been up all night because he had been planning to leave me homeless at 60. But I forced a smile that felt carved out of stone. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Just made coffee." He kissed my forehead. The touch felt cold, like a stranger leaning in too close. He had no idea that I knew, and that was my power. Over the next few days, I became an actress, a very convincing one. I cooked for him, I laughed at his jokes, I pretended to listen when he rambled about work, and the more normal I acted, the braver he became. He extended the meetings with Clara, he forgot to come home on time, he guarded his phone even more tightly, and every new slip made my revenge stronger. But pretending wasn't easy. Every time he touched me, I felt a wave of disgust. Every time he lied to my face, something inside me cracked a little more. Yet I swallowed it all and waited. Because sometimes silence is not weakness, it's strategy. One night, when he thought I was asleep, he received a message. The screen lit up the dark room. "Clara, you told her yet? We're almost ready." My heart thudded painfully. Almost ready? Ready for what? To walk into my home one day and find the locks changed? To see everything I built handed to a man who treated me like a spare option? He slipped out of the bedroom to reply. I opened my eyes. I didn't even cry this time. Just noted the time, 11:46 p.m., and the pattern. He always texted her late at night, always when he thought I was asleep, always when he was planning the next move. I needed help. Not from friends, they would panic. Not from family, they lived in another state. I needed the kind of calm, logical support you only get from someone who has been through hell and survived. So the next morning, I called the only person I trusted more than myself, my older sister, Linda. She picked up on the second ring. "You sound tired. What's wrong?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. I had told no one until this point, and saying it out loud made the betrayal feel heavier. "Linda, I think Eric is planning to leave me, and he's trying to take everything. She didn't explode the way I expected, didn't gasp, didn't say, "Oh my God." Instead, her voice softened into something protective and steady. "Tell me everything, slowly." And I did. I told her about the documents, the messages, the house transfer, the secret accounts, the late-night texts. I didn't tell her how terrified I was. She heard it anyway. "I knew he always tried to control things," she said. "But this is calculated. He's not just cheating, he's preparing to replace you." Replace. The word sliced through me. "But listen, you have time, and if he thinks you're unaware, that's good. That means you can prepare too." Hearing someone else say it made something inside me ignite. Not anger, not sadness, but purpose. "What do I do?" I whispered. "There's only one thing worse than a man who lies. A man who thinks he's smarter than the woman he's lying to." I almost smiled because she was right. "Don't confront him," she said. "You collect everything, every document, every message, every bank statement. You need proof before he makes his move. When he plays his final card, you'll already have the deck in your hands." I felt my spine straighten. My sister believed in me. More importantly, she saw what Eric couldn't, that beneath the soft, trusting wife he took for granted was a woman who had survived more than he could ever imagine. We ended the call with a plan, a real strategy. Step 1, secure copies of every document. Step 2, quietly move my personal money to a safe account. Step 3, track his financial changes. Step 4, wait for the moment he thinks he has won, because that moment would be the one I destroyed him. A week passed, then 2, and every day I grew stronger. One night, while cleaning his office, I found a printed schedule. It wasn't even hidden, just sitting on his desk, bold and careless. Meeting with attorney Thursday, 3 p.m. My fingers tightened around the paper. That was the moment. That was his final preparation. He was going to make his move soon, maybe even this week. And on the night before his appointment, he walked into our bedroom with the same smug confidence he carried everywhere lately. "Hey," he said casually, "we should talk tomorrow evening. Something important." Something important. I felt a chill run down my spine, but my face remained calm. "Of course," I said softly. "Tomorrow is fine." He smiled. A smile that said he believed victory was already in his hands. He had no idea that tomorrow, the day he thought he would win, would be the day I ended his perfect little plan. The next morning felt strangely calm, too calm, like the air before a storm finally breaks open. I woke up before Eric, sat at the edge of the bed, and looked at the man sleeping next to me, a man who once held my hand during doctor's visits, who once brought me roses on my birthdays, who once whispered that he'd love me until our hair turned silver. And now, here he was, ready to walk out of my life and leave me with nothing but memories he no longer valued. I didn't feel heartbreak anymore, just a quiet, controlled fire inside my chest. I got dressed in simple clothes, tied my hair back, and made myself a cup of coffee. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to feel grounded, solid, present. Today wasn't the day I would break down. Today was the day I would rise. Around noon, I gathered everything, the documents I copied, the screenshots of the messages, the bank statements, the property papers. I placed them neatly in a folder and tucked it into my bag. My sister called when I was locking the door behind me. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered. "More ready than he thinks." "Good," she said. "Remember, calm is power." She was right. Anger clouds judgment. Calm destroys enemies. I drove to my attorney's office, the same one Eric didn't know I had hired. I walked in with the kind of confidence I had forgotten lived inside me. My lawyer, Mrs. Harding, looked up with warm eyes. "You look stronger today," she said. "I feel stronger, and I'm done being blindsided." We spent 2 hours reviewing every piece of evidence. Her eyebrows raised higher and higher as she flipped through the papers. "This is enough to protect everything you've worked for, and more than enough to expose what he's been planning," she said. "What happens next?" I asked. "You wait," she said. "Let him speak first, let him believe he's in control. Then you present this, and you walk away with everything he never expected you to keep." Her confidence made me breathe easier. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. When I returned home, the sun had already dipped low. The living room was dim except for one lamp, and Eric sat on the couch as if he'd been rehearsing a performance all day. He looked at me with a strange mixture of guilt and excitement, like he wanted to look sad but couldn't quite hide his anticipation for whatever life he had built with Clara. "Hey," he said softly, patting the seat next to him. "We should talk." I sat, calm as the ocean before a rising tide. He took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I think we should go our separate ways." Just like that. No hesitation, no shame. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I simply waited for him to keep revealing himself. And he did. "It's not working anymore," he continued. "We've grown apart. I don't want things to get messy, so I talked to someone who can help us handle this smoothly." Someone. By that, he meant his attorney, the one he was hiding. He wasn't done. "And I know the house means a lot to you, but I think it's fair that I keep it considering, I've paid most of it." A lie. A bold, stupid lie. "And about the savings, maybe you can take a small portion, just enough to settle comfortably for a while. After that, we move on with our lives." I looked at him, the man I spent decades supporting, the man whose meals I cooked, whose clothes I washed, whose dreams I prioritized before my own. And now he wanted to hand me scraps from the life I built with him? That was the moment something inside me clicked. Not anger, not sadness, but certainty. I slowly reached into my bag and placed my folder on the table. "What's that?" he asked, calmly. "Something I think you should see." He opened the folder expecting divorce proposals or emotional letters. Instead, he found exact copies of the documents he tried so hard to keep hidden. His eyes widened. His mouth fell open. His whole face drained of color. How did you?" I said quietly. "You think you're the only one who can plan?" He flipped through the pages faster and faster. The account transfers, the property papers under Clara's name, the messaging logs, everything. His hands started shaking. "This isn't what you think," he stuttered. "Oh, I know exactly what it is. It's proof. Proof that you plan to leave me with nothing while you build a new life behind my back." He stood abruptly, his voice rising. "You've been spying on me?" I shook my head. "No, I've been surviving you." For the first time, he was silent. "I met with my attorney today," I continued. "She has everything, and I am filing for divorce on grounds of financial misconduct and intentional deprivation." His jaw dropped. You're filing against me?" "Yes, because unlike you, I'm not afraid to fight openly." He stepped back, stunned. But you don't have the money for..." "Oh, I do. I moved what's mine, quietly, while you were too busy texting Clara." His face twisted in disbelief. "And one more thing," I added softly. "You won't be getting this house, or the savings, or the retirement fund, because the court will see exactly what you were trying to do." He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, mumbling, "This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to know." I stood up, walked toward the door, and paused. "That's the problem with your perfect little plan," I said. "You built it on the assumption that I was weak." He looked up slowly, tears forming, regret finally hitting him like a storm. "But I'm not weak," I whispered. "I'm awake." And with that, I walked out. In the weeks that followed, everything moved quickly. My attorney handled every document. The court saw his financial manipulation for what it was, and the judge ruled decisively in my favor. Property, savings, security, all protected. Eric tried to beg, tried to apologize, tried to blame Clara, tried to rewrite history. But it was too late. He didn't just lose me, he lost the life he tried to steal for himself. Clara disappeared from his world soon after. Maybe she realized he wasn't the man she thought. Maybe she never really cared. Or maybe she just didn't want to be with someone who had nothing left. As for me, I rebuilt. Slowly, peacefully, beautifully. I started gardening again, reading again, laughing again. I learned something powerful. Age doesn't make you weaker. It makes you wiser, sharper, more dangerous to people who underestimate you. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one planning her comeback. And the day he thought he had won, that was the day I ended his perfect little plan and started writing my own.